5.1.2 The URL. The URL, or the Uniform Resource Locator, is a text-based address that identifies the location of a resource on the internet. It can be the address of a web page, image, video, or any other resource available on the internet. A URL can contain three main components. First one, protocol. Second, domain name. And the last one is web page or file name. First component of a URL is called protocol. A protocol is a set of rules that define how data is transferred between your browser and a website. Example of protocols include HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, etc. Next component of a URL is called the domain name. So this is the address or the name of the website that you want to visit. For example, google.com, facebook.com, youtube.com, etc. The last component of a URL is called the web page or the file name. So this is the specific page or the file that you want to access on a website. For example, about.html, context.html, etc. What does the URL primarily identify on the internet? Option A, the address of a resource. Option B, the speed of an internet connection. Option C, the browser version used. Option D, the file size of a document. So the correct answer is option A, the address of a resource. Which of the following is not a component of a URL? Option A, protocol. Option B, domain name. Option C, IP address version. Option D, web page or the file name. So the correct answer is C, IP address version. The URL is used to identify the location of a resource on the internet. So the statement is true. Well, now let's summarize the topic. So URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator. It's a text-based address used to locate resources on the internet. It has three components. Number one, protocol. Number two, domain name. Number three, web page or the file name. It uniquely points to a specific resource on the web page, for example, a picture or video. And lastly, a URL does not contain spaces. What does the URL stand for? Option A, Universal Resource Locator. Option B, Uniform Resource Locator. Option C, Unified Resource Lookup. Option D, Universal Resource Link. So the correct answer is option B. URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator. Which of the following is true about URLs? Option A, URLs can contain spaces between characters. Option B, URL must start with www. Option C, URLs cannot contain spaces. And option D, URL do not use any slashes. So the correct answer is option C, URLs cannot contain spaces. 5.1.3 Servers. What are servers? A server is a powerful computer or system that provides services, data, or resources to other computers known as client over a network. You need to know two types of servers. First one is the DNS server and second one is the web server. A DNS server is the computer that stores a database of domain names and their corresponding IP addresses. A web server is a type of server that hosts websites and delivers web pages to users over the internet. What does a DNS server store? Option A, a list of websites and user accounts. Option B, a directory of multimedia files. Option C, a record of all internet users. Option D, a database of domain names and IP addresses. So the correct answer is option D. A DNS server stores a database of domain names and IP addresses. Which type of server hosts websites and delivers web pages to users over the internet? Option A, file server. Option B, web server. Option C, DNS server. Option D, proxy server. So the correct answer is web server. Well, now let's discuss about the DNS or the domain name system. DNS is a system used to translate domain names into IP addresses, allowing the computers to locate websites. DNS servers are responsible for looking up domain names and returning the corresponding IP address. If a DNS server does not find the domain name, it forwards the request to the next DNS server. The DNS process continues until the domain name is found or a not found message is returned. Once the DNS finds the domain name, it sends the equivalent IP address back to the web browser. Okay, so now let's see how DNS translates domain names to IP addresses. Let's say a user wants to open google.com. It opens the web browser like Chrome or Edge. It types the URL www.google.com in its browser's address bar. Browser will send this domain name to the DNS server. DNS server has a list or database of all the websites and their IP addresses. So the DNS server will look up the google.com in its database. Once it finds the google.com in its list, it will send the equivalent IP address back to the web browser. Now, let's see another scenario. In this scenario, a user wants to open the tiktok.com. Okay, so the browser sends the request to the first DNS server. DNS will look up in its database. It couldn't find. In this case, it will request the next DNS server to find the IP address for the user. The next DNS server will look up the domain name tiktok.com in its database. Okay, so in this case, the second DNS found the tiktok.com. So it will send the IP address back to the web browser. When a DNS server cannot locate the domain name you're trying to access, it triggers a series of steps. For example, if you type a website URL into your browser and press enter, the browser sends a domain name to the DNS server. The DNS server searches its database for the domain name. If it doesn't find it, the request is passed on to another DNS server. If the second DNS server also cannot find the domain name, it sends the page not found message back to the browser. What happens if a DNS server doesn't find the domain name? Option A, it stops the search and returns an error. Option B, it forwards the request to the next DNS server. Option C, it deletes the domain name from the database. Option D, it contacts the web page directly for the IP address. So the correct answer is option B, it forwards the request to the next DNS server. What is sent back to the web browser once the DNS server finds the domain name? Option A, the domain name and the file location. Option B, the URL and the path of the file. Option C, the equivalent IP address. Option D, the content of the requested web page. So the correct answer is option C, the equivalent IP address. The DNS server stores domain names along with their equivalent IP addresses. So this statement is true.